I mean, if you had to pick a topic that really is the next phase of bass fishing, it'd be suspended bass. I mean, think about it. I mean, that's the unknown out there. That's what all the new electronics are trying to show you, is the side vision and all this stuff to find those suspended bass that don't relate to anything. So yeah, this is probably, this talk, whatever I say now, probably in 5 years would be totally useless, because we're really moving fast now. Whereas it took a long time to get to this point, I think now with the electronics we have and all the stuff we have, it's going to move a lot quicker. How many of you have gone to like a Bass Pro Shops or a Cabela's where they have a big tank and those bass are sitting out there in the middle of the tank, right? And the tank is huge. Maybe some of them are big as this room. And there's structure all over. I mean, big gnarly stumps and rock piles and all this beautiful cover. And you look out in the tank and all the big bass are sitting right in the middle, just sitting there. Just not moving, not flinching, not doing anything. You think, oh, why aren't they tucked up against that rock to eat one of them bluegills? It's such a different world, I think, of fishing. The fishes, how they react down there, than what we picture it as. So I think that's the first thing about suspended bass. They've always said when you're fishing the bank, let's say you're fishing a normal bank, flipping down a bank or going down a cattail bank, basically you're fishing for about 10% of those fish. 90% of them are out behind you. They're sitting where you're never casting, you're never looking. That's where they're living. They're living out there in the middle, relating to structures, relating to different things like that. So I think that's a big part of what we're looking at. We want to try to figure out how to catch some of that 90%. Okay? Now my first experience with suspended bass, since I'm from the West originally, was on Lake Mead. Lake Mead's a huge monster lake out on the Colorado River on Nevada and Arizona border. It's 585 feet deep in places. It's, 100 and some miles long. And the water's like your bathtub. I mean, you can see 30, 35 feet. Especially back in the day, it was just super clear because it was really full. Well, I fished the U.S. Open tournaments when I was a young kid. That's what I learned how to fish. That was the biggest tournament in the country years ago. And this is in the 80s. And we fished little jig head worms. It was finesse fishing, but it was a little double hook worm. We'd fish that everywhere, catch fish. And you go up on a point, you throw it out there, and you might catch fish. You go to the next point, might catch another fish, might not. Well, every once in a while, you couldn't catch anything. You just wouldn't catch anything. And you might drift in, and I started drifting in on these points where you're sitting. You can see the bottom now. It's like 15, 20 feet deep. And I just throw that worm out there like a needle in a haystack. I mean, literally, just as far as I could throw it, no target, no nothing. And every once in a while, I'd catch one. And I'm like, wow. Now, this thing had double hooks, so it had a little trailer hook on it, and I'd always catch them on that trailer, like they just nip it. They weren't real active out there, but I'd catch one out there. I'm like, so instead of thinking those fish were living in, let's say, 25 feet of water on that point all the time, I started realizing those fish lived in 25 feet of water, but out over 50 and 100 feet. And then when they came in to feed, they come in. They come in at the contact zones. What we always look for is that contact zone where those fish, you're going to catch them. All right, about 10 years ago, it was actually before that, but 10 years ago, swim baits changed fishing, bass fishing, at least on this part of the country, a lot. Really changed how we approach fish and how we catch fish. People say it replaced spinner baits. People say it replaced crankbaits in places, and it has. But a swim bait, 10, 15 years, we didn't talk about them for bass. We didn't talk about them for, especially the bigger ones for bass. Whether that was right or wrong, it just wasn't part of the conversation. So now it's changed a lot. And you go on Tackle Warehouse and you hit swim baits, and you're going to be able to see every style, every color, every size, everything you want on swim baits. They've done a great job of keeping all the current good swim baits, and you can really have fun with it. And it's an ongoing process like suspended fish. There's swim baits that are out now that weren't out a year or two ago that are awesome. I mean, it's stuff we've been asking for. So I think that's really where when I talk about swim baits, I'm showing you a couple of the ones I use, but there's a lot of good ones when it comes to swim baits. And some of the best ones are really hard to get a handle of. There's one that I used a lot last year at Lake Havasu that I had to borrow the swim bait from a guy. He wouldn't give it to me. He'd let me use it because I was fishing for 100 grand. He let me use it. I had to give it back to him. You know, I did pretty good in the tournament. I had to give it back to him. And then the guy that makes it, he saw the pictures on Bassmaster that I'd used that swim bait. He allowed me to be on a list to get that swim bait in a year, to buy it in a year. I'm like, wow, thank you, you know? So, I mean, the swim bait industry's really changed, okay? It really has. It's a lot of secrets. There's a lot of tricks. There's a lot of stuff like that. And I don't want to get into a full in-depth swim bait stuff. I just want you to realize that there's some really good swim baits that catch fish. And the reason a swim bait catches fish on suspended fish so well is, one, you can present it to them pretty naturally. And two, you can use a big enough one that you can actually turn them from neutral to aggressive. And that's one thing I don't think we really realized a few years ago. Sometimes you can upsize your lures. You know, I'm talking about finesse and keeping it small and catching, and that's the way we've gone for years. I've found in the last few years, sometimes you can just get something that's so ridiculously big.
Welcome to Bass University TV, an online video training course where you'll learn champion bass fishing techniques from pro anglers Pete Glusek, Mike Iaconelli, and their talented special guests. From on the water to in the classroom, you'll learn sound techniques and strong fundamental bass fishing skills. Watch hours of video content on multiple topics at your own pace for a low monthly fee. Cancel at any time. Information is power in the sport of fishing, so learn from the very best. Subscribe to Bass University TV today.